Hello everyone, have a nice day. Previously, rumors and staged proof twisted the truth, turning Uri and Tu Tieu into the supposed culprits. The village whispered, friendships cracked, and a tense night under the orchard's lamp left trust hanging by a thread. Today, we pick up as Linh disappears at dawn, a cryptic note surfaces, and a trail leads to the abandoned Tien Truong factory, where a weathered ledger, missing wages, and the initial K hint at the real debt behind the lies. If you find it interesting, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. Linh left at dawn, Egan says, breath fogging in the chill. His boots are wet, his eyes still red from a night that never quite ended. She left a note. I didn't lose. I just left before they could tell my ending. The words land like a dropped cup quiet, then everywhere. Tu Tieu turns the paper in her hands, crease and decrease, as if straight lines could tame a message that sharp. Uri's gaze slips to the floor. The jute cord he retired at sunrise still bites a pale mark across his palm. Between the three of them stands a silence with shape dense, tangible, alive. Morning after the trap. Dew has stitched pearls along the lemon leaves. The smell of old ash clings to the porch, faint as regret. Tu Tieu wipes the cabinet one more time, even though it's clean, then aligns the bowls, the teacups, the chipped plate that only she still likes. Her hands move on habit, but her eyes keep listening to last night's wind. Uri moves through the yard, sliding the ladder under the hanging lamp, checking each knot, each nail. It's not the note that worries me, he says without looking down. It's the voice behind it. Egan leans on the doorframe, rain, dark patches drying on his sleeves. The voice says she's not done. People who carry guilt don't travel far, Tu Tieu murmurs, folding the paper once, laying it flat again, not until they speak it. By late afternoon, the sun tilts through the orchard at a gentler angle, throwing long bars of gold over the path. Uri nearly misses it. A small envelope tucked beneath the step, edges softened by dew. Inside, a faded photograph of Linh with a man in a worker shirt, the corner of a badge visible. Tien Truong Factory. No address, no date, only a line scrawled in graphite across the back. He started it. Egan frowns. Is she shifting blame? Uri turns the photo toward the light, jaw tightening. No, she's pushing the first domino and walking away. Tu Tieu looks at the orchard. Droplets tremble on the leaves like they're thinking. She exhales. Then tonight, she says, voice low, we finish what she began. They don't talk about fear. They count what they'll need. Uri fills the lantern with new oil and tests the wick until the flame stands steady and honest. Tu Tieu packs salt and cloth into a small pouch, then ties it twice with a piece of that same jute cord, the knot neat, the end symmetrical. Egan slings his bag over his shoulder and checks his small notebook, the usual scrawl of witness names now softened by humidity. A pressed lemon leaf flattening a page that mattered once. Evening rises out of the grass. Mist threads the trees. The three step down from the porch, and their shapes begin to blur at the edges, like the field itself is trying to keep them. The hush of night folds over the path. Somewhere, a stray dog barks at a thing only dogs can see. The sound dies without echo. They walk until the light on the porch becomes a coin, then nothing. They walk until the jute cord at Uri's wrist warms with sweat and the knot stops feeling like a plan and starts feeling like a promise. They walk until the wind changes and brings a smell of tin and old rain. The scent of the factory ruins beyond the orchard, where the roofs fell in and the papers blew out, then back, then out again. It is too late to go farther and too early to turn back. They stand on the shoulder of the night and say nothing. When they return lighter by one decision. They will leave at dawn. Sleep is a rumor that never visits. Tu Tieu pours water into the clay pot and sets it on the small brazier on the porch. The coals glow like patient stars. When the first thin steam rises, Uri brings 2 cups. He doesn't speak. He angles the spout so the pour sounds like rain against soft leaves. "Do you think she's really gone?" he asks finally. Tu Tieu stares into the yard. The lemon trees blink with moths. "If she had nothing left to say, yes," she answers. "But that photo is a sentence without a period." Uri's smile is broken and fond. "You always liked grammar. You always needed it," she says, and lets the corner of her mouth lift. Wind combs the trees. A shadow ticks at the edge of the orchard, gathers itself into a shape, then thins and disappears. They both see it and pretend for one breath that they didn't. Uri picks up the lantern, the flame a small, brave heart in the glass. They find only footprints small, hurried, drying to crust even as they look. The direction is unmistakable. Toward the road no one takes unless they're going to the same place for the same reason, curiosity or memory. The Tien Truong warehouse sits where the lane kinks, concrete bones under a sky that acts like it forgot about roofs. The prints ride that line, then slip into grass and vanish. "Tomorrow," Uri says. "Tomorrow," Tu Tieu repeats like a vow. Dawn is gray and honest. They don't hurry breakfast. They barely taste it. Egan arrives with a whisper pinned to his breath. "Someone saw Linh near the factory ruins," he tells them, eyes flicking to the burlap bag at Tu Tieu's feet. She's looking for something, or someone. Tu Tieu retrieves the photograph from the shelf once more. The penciled words he started seem darker, as if they'd fattened overnight on meaning. She runs her thumb along the edge until a paper cut blooms, thin and insisting. "If this isn't the ending," she says, "maybe we've only touched the surface." They dress like people who plan to be remembered. Uri in the white shirt he keeps too clean for field work, sleeves rolled. Tu Tieu in the simple tee and jeans that let her move without asking permission. Egan in the jacket with inside pockets that always hide one more pen, one more folded truth. On the path, villagers watch and pretend not to. A woman selling noodles coughs twice and wipes her hands 3 times in the same place. 2 boys with a slingshot argue about lemons versus guavas and don't look up when the trio passes. The banyan holds its breath. Even the dogs do their barking in their chests. "You don't owe her," Egan says as they cross the shallow ditch, the factory's broken silhouette growing on the horizon. Tu Tieu doesn't slow. "We owe ourselves," she replies. "Debt doesn't end when one person leaves. It ends when truth stops being owed." Uri glances at her profile, jaw firm, eyes soft. He wants to stay close, wants to say, "I'll take the first step and the last," wants to say, "I'm here in all the ways that matter." He says instead, "If we find what she wanted us to find, we do this clean. No noise, no spectacle." We let the page speak. The page, Egan mutters. Always the page. It's where liars get tired, Tu Tieu says. They reach the fence, or what's left of it. 2 posts, a sagging line of wire, a stubborn hinge that remembers the habit of closing. The warehouse floor beyond is a scab of cement, patched by weeds. A cracked pipe ticks slow, patient drips that mark time without mercy. Sunlight breaks through gaps in the tin roof and lays silver rungs across the shadows, a ladder that leads nowhere. Uri tests the door with his shoulder. It gives with a tired groan, and a smell pushes out paper rot, old glue, damp secrets. He lifts the lantern, though daylight is enough, because sometimes you carry light not to see, but to be seen by the part of you that might forget. Last chance, Egan says, not meaning it. Tu Tieu steps in first, soles whispering over grit. Her hand finds the small pouch at her hip, palm flattening against the salt, the cloth, the knot, that neat knot whose ends are the exact same length. They pause just inside, pupils thinning to match the brightness. The factory holds its breath. Somewhere, a pigeon shifts, wings brushing tin, with a sound like a page turned reluctantly. Look, Uri says. On the floor, a trail. Not footprints this time, but a patch of dry where everything else is wet, like someone sat there, long enough to push the damp away with their body heat. Beside it, a scatter of swollen files, a corner of brown leather peeking from beneath. Tu Tieu kneels, reaches toward the leather, then stops. She looks at Uri. He nods once clean, no spectacle, and angles the lantern so the light falls soft. The breeze nudges the door, and it swings wider, a slow, open mouth. From beyond the orchard, thunder tests its voice, low, far, promising. Whatever this is, Egan says quietly, we don't know it after. That's the point, Tu Tieu answers. Her fingers touch the weathered cover. The leather is warm from sun, cold from shade, old from living. She lifts it, and the sound of the first page loosening from years of staying put is small, decisive, final as a coin landing flat. The ledger sighs in Tu Tieu's hands. Dust lifts and hangs, glittering in the beams that fall through the ripped tin like thin ladders to nowhere. She eases the cover back. The first page is swollen at the corners, the ink in the older columns spidered by damp. Uri angles the lantern until its small heart glows along the margin lines. Payroll, Egan murmurs. Look at unit codes, batch tallies. Keep it clean, Uri reminds him, though his voice is soft, not scolding. He doesn't touch, just looks, the way you look at a sleeping child or a confession. Tu Tieu turns another page, then another, steady as counting breaths. The handwriting changes halfway through one hand, neat and patient. The next hurried, a little arrogant. She stops where the entries go thin, then crooked. On the last leaf, the paper is thinner, almost translucent. In the bottom corner, a shape gleams faintly where the ink has pooled and dried like lacquer, the letter K. She traces the air above it, not the letter itself. There, she says. Egan leans closer. Initial, or a mark. Or a promise, Uri says. They read the columns back to front names, dates, amounts. Some numbers repeat when they shouldn't. Some names vanish abruptly. Across 3 lines, a neat sum has been nudged higher, then forced lower again, and the correction is written in a different pen. The curve of the 5 like a hooked finger. Tu Tieu turns the ledger so the light hits more honestly. "These aren't mistakes," she says. "They're edits." "Look at the stamp," Egan whispers. In the center of the page, a seal, the factory crest, faded to a ghost. Over it, a faint second stamp barely kissing the paper, like someone tested it and changed their mind. Uri nods at a margin note. Bonus column relocated to Q4. Relocated. His mouth twists. Relocated is a kind word for stolen. Thunder paces the distance, too far to count between flash and sound. The door creaks. The breeze smells of wet iron and drowned glue. Tu Tieu takes the faded photograph from her pocket and lays it beside the ledger. Linh and the man in the worker's shirt, the Tien Truong badge half shown, like a secret that wanted to be found but not owned. She flips the photo. He started it. Started what? Egan asks. A way of paying debts with other people's wages, Uri says, eyes still scanning columns. Started a story where the ending was always a little short. Footsteps scuff somewhere in the far aisle, too light for a grown man. Uri lifts his head. The lantern flame tightens, thins, then steadies. Shadows move like tired animals. "Linh?" Tu Tieu calls, not loud. "If you're here, we're not here to punish you." "Punishment is what happens when the truth shows up late," Uri adds. "We're trying to make it on time." Silence answers. Then the slow drip from the pipe resumes its counting. A pigeon ruffles once. Back to stillness. They keep reading 3 names with bonuses cut and reassigned. A pattern of tiny arrows nudging figures toward a narrow column that collapses into an initial. K. The same letter surfaces on a requisition slip, stapled crooked to the last page. The staple has rusted like dried blood. Egan lowers to a crouch, the notebook balanced on his thigh. "K who? K what?" He scribbles dates, sums, initials, the shape of the 5, the ghost stamp. "We'll need cross-checks, pay slips, witness names. Ms. Hoa would know where they kept the duplicates." Tu Tieu feels the ledger's weight shift in her palms, as if it is relieved to be looked at properly. "He started it," she says again, and here's how the sentence tilts toward a larger room. "But she kept it moving. She thought it would pay for something she couldn't pay any other way." Another sound, now fabric brushing on cement. A person choosing to breathe after a long time of not. "Don't run," Tu Tieu says, turning her head, not her body. Running is how the debt grows. A figure things out of the dark between 2 fallen shelves, then resolves. Linh. Her hair is damp against her cheeks. Mud flecks her knees. In her left hand, she carries a smaller ledger, a cousin of the one on the floor. In her right, a folded page that looks like it has been opened and closed so many times it learned all the creases by heart. Her voice is brittle and careful. "If they ever find out," she says, not quite to them, not quite to herself, "who will they call the liar then?" No one rushes. Uri dips the lantern a little, easing the light so it doesn't feel like an accusation. "Come," Tu Tieu says, softer. "We can read it together." Linh steps closer, shoes scraping grit. She sets the second ledger on a crate and the folded page beside it. The page is a payroll list with 3 names missing from the bottom, the space where they should be white and raw. Beside the blank, a mark, K. Next to the mark, a different hand loopier, more dramatic, has written a single word, advance. "They told me it would balance out," Lynn says. Her eyes shine in the lantern's live gold. That advance meant anticipation, a promise paid early to help costs that came too fast. But the column never paid back. The gap kept asking for more names. Who told you? Egan asks. The man in the photograph, she says, and lowers her gaze. And the one above him, who never signed anything except with that letter. K, Uri breathes. Lynn nods. K is not a name. K is a door key. Tu Tieu's throat tightens. The sentence on the photograph, the mark like lacquer on the ledger, the ghost stamp, all the ways silence teaches itself different outfits. She wants to reach out, to take Lynn's hand, but she keeps hers on the ledger instead, as if steadiness can be carried through paper. Why did you leave? Uri asks. Because I thought if I wasn't here when the story ended, the story couldn't end with me, Lynn says. A small laugh slips and startles her. That note was bravado. I left before they could tell my ending. But the endings don't wait. They arrive with or without you. She lifts the smaller ledger, flips to a page tagged by a strip of red cloth. In the margin, a neat block of text, a transfer of bonus liabilities to a niche development reserve, signed by a rubber stamp that never quite presses the same way twice. At the bottom, a flourish, then K. There, Egan says, voice tight. That's a bridge, from wages to a fund with a nice word, niche. Pretty names are good at hiding ugly work, Tu Tieu says. Another rumble rolls over the roof. The light changes the day slants toward a kind of gray that means decide soon. The lantern flickers as the air thickens, then steadies like it remembers who it is. What do you want from us? Uri asks Lynn, not unkind. Not forgiveness, she says quickly. Not yet. Just the page to speak, without me yelling over it. That we can do, he replies. They arrange the papers the way a throat clears before speaking. Ledger first, then photo, then the folded payroll list with its missing names and its greedy K. Egan photographs each page on his old phone with no flash, no flourish, then writes down file numbers the way a person writes prayers, carefully, once. Copies for the district, he says. A set for the village. Custody chain. Witness statements. And one page read under the banyan, Tu Tieu adds. No cameras, no spectacle. The page speaks, Uri echoes. Lynn swallows. If they ask me, you'll tell the truth you carried, Tu Tieu says, not the one you were given. A long breath moves through all four of them, as if they are one animal learning it can live. Outside, the wind picks up. A fine dust of rust shakes from the beams and freckles the ledger cover like new constellations. They close the books without snapping them. Uri ties the pouch tighter at Tu Tieu's hip. His fingers brush hers, a small anchor in a large sea. Egan slips the photograph into a clear sleeve, then into the inside pocket that never loses anything. Time, Uri says. They step into the doorway and stop. Rain stitches the distance in neat slanted lines. The orchard beyond wears the first wet like a welcome. Thunder murmurs somewhere past the banyan, closer now, but gentle enough to warn without striking. Walk, Tu Tieu says. They walk. The rain unknots dust from the path. The ledger under Uri's arm is heavier but not cruel. Lynn keeps a pace behind, as if unsure whether she belongs with them or with the building that taught her how to keep quiet. At the broken fence, she hesitates. Tu Tieu waits, hand open. After a breath, Linh takes it. The village is a handful of roofs, blurred by rain. When they reach the first gate, a woman looks up from washing bowls and stills, the tilt of her wrist never dropping the ladle. Two boys lean under a tree and pretend their slingshot needs repair. The banyan gathers the drops and lets them fall when it wants. At dusk, Egan says, we'll read. At dusk, Uri agrees. They reach the porch, with the jute cord still marking where Uri's morning patience dug into his skin. He sets the ledger on the table, as if it has a pulse. Tu Tieu lights the lantern, though it is not yet dark, because there will be a moment when they'll need its small, fierce heart. Wind threads the room. The flame bows, then straightens. Thunder sounds nearer, a slow drum. Linh stands beside the window, watching the path, her face cut by the pale of the sky. If they ever find out, she whispers again, but the shape of the question has changed, softened at the corners. Who will they call the liar then? The one who asks the page to lie, Tu Tieu answers. And what will they call you? Linh asks. Dunnoing, Tu Tieu says. The lantern flickers once, twice steady then, as the rain thickens and the room goes from gray to silver to almost night. It gutters to a thin blue thread and goes out. Black rises like a curtain. The storm speaks in the distance. Somewhere, a single drip keeps time.
Sáng hôm sau, cái bẫy, Egan đến với một cú sốc. Linh đã đi để lại một tờ giấy nhắn. Cô ấy không mất, cô ấy đã rời đi trước khi những người khác kịp viết lời kết của mình. Từ Tieu và Uri phát hiện ra một phong bì đẫm xương với một bức ảnh chỉ vào nhà máy thiên trường. Tại đống đổ nát, họ mở cuốn sổ. Cái đã cũ, bảng lương đã chỉnh sửa, nhưng cái tên đã biến mất. Một con dấu ma và một chữ cái đầu K được lặp lại gắn với một khoản dự trữ ngách. Linh xuất hiện từ bóng tối với cuốn sổ cái thứ hai và một trang bảng lương gấp lại được đánh dấu K và ứng trước. Cô thừa nhận sự đồng lõa, sau đó chọn sự thật. Uri, Tự Tieu, Egan và Linh ghi chép các trang, sao chép kế hoạch cho huyện và làng, và thề là sẽ đọc to nó dưới gốc cây đa, không có máy ảnh, trang giấy sẽ lên tiếng. Khi cơn mưa xuống và đèn lồng mờ dần, họ mang cuốn sổ cái về nhà, sẵn sàng chấm dứt sự im lặng đã bắt đầu.